Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to Too Many Games. Yes, that's right, we're back already with another video. Impressive, I know. Today we're going to continue in our video series on Epic Armageddon, and we are looking at spacecraft. This is the final installment in the rules section of Epic Armageddon, but not the final video for the channel or for Epic Armageddon on the channel itself. There's a lot more to come. There are still more parts of the game that we will cover, namely how do you set up the board, how do you choose forces, objectives, and also winning the game. We've got to know all of that yet. Next up after this video, I should have an Orc Army review out soon for the standard Orc Warhorde, so keep an eye out for that. It's all prepared, just have to record it. If you're interested in Epic Armageddon, then I suggest you check out the other videos that I've released so far, going over the rules and how to play. So let's have a look at spacecraft. So Epic Armageddon has a way of basically representing the huge, massive ships that are in space in the game. They're too big to represent on the board itself, as they would occupy many, many boards in order to represent these huge behemoth craft that are in space. But there is a way to represent their effect on the battlefield. You can have one spacecraft per battle, per player, so you can't take more than one in your force. Spacecraft have a few different roles and a few different things they can do in the game. They can do orbital bombardment, so you can strike down at the enemy from your spacecraft and try and dislodge them or disrupt them or even destroy them. They can do more precise pinpoint attacks, so try and target particular units that are a threat. And they can also land units on the board. So the fact is you're doing a planetfall. We've seen the planetfall rule before. You're doing that from a ship generally down onto a planet. They can do all three of these at once as well, depending on the actual spacecraft. Okay, planning. Usually a spacecraft is represented by a model. A lot of people use the Battlefleet Gothic models. That's what I use myself in order to represent the model, but technically you could do it without a model. How do you set it up? Well, players take turns with the highest strategy rating going first is general, and they set up their model next to the board. So not on the board per se, but you set up on your own board edge, touching the edge of the board, just to represent and let your opponent know that you do actually have a spacecraft supporting you. You declare to your opponent what turn your ship is arriving. So they will know that. That's open information. And you cannot choose the same turn as your opponent. So if both of you have spacecraft in the game, you can't turn up on the same turn into the battlefield. So the highest strategy rating person obviously has an advantage in when their spacecraft is going to have an effect on the battle. Then you have to secretly record the drop zone for any planetfall that's occurring, the location of any bombardments, and you must physically record these locations via measurements to the locations. The rules suggest that you measure from the model itself and write that down. So it might be, 50 centimeters ahead and then to the right 30. But as long as it's accurate and clear, it doesn't matter too much. And I find sometimes the models on the side of the board tend to get moved around and shuffled around as you don't want to lean over them and hit them. So we usually just record it down as kind of a grid reference as to where it's going to drop in. And we've never had issues with that. Okay, FAQ time. Do all the units with planetfall have to have the same drop zone? No, the answer is you just need one drop zone for each formation entering play via planetfall. So that's great if you've got a themed army where your list is turning up via planetfall, or a lot of it is. You can drop things down across the battlefield to give you a bit more flexibility. Okay, having a look at these spacecraft operations. Spacecraft activate in the action phase of the turn, so just like a normal formation would, and they still require an action test as normal. If they pass this test, they can then carry out an orbital bombardment, their pinpoint attacks if they have any, and then planetfall as well. If they fail their test, the spacecraft will be delayed to the next available and free turn. So if your opponent has the next turn, you'd be going after that. Another FAQ. What is the order of events with regards to a spacecraft's operation? So the answer, number 1, the spacecraft resolves all of its orbital bombardment and pinpoint attacks, assuming an action test is passed. Each formation entering play via planetfall is resolved, so placing and then scattering it and resolving any special abilities like those on Space Marine drop pods. These can be in any order the player controlling the spacecraft desires. And then lastly, check to see if any formations that were subject to orbital bombardment, pinpoint attacks, or special abilities are broken. So you basically soften the place up first with your bombardment and your pinpoint attacks, provided you passed. Then you drop your guys out, then you see who's still around, who's broken. Orbital bombardments, let's look at more of these. So you've got to check the data sheet of the actual spacecraft to see if A, you can do it and what it looks like to do it. They use a template for these that is 12 centimeters in diameter, so they're quite large in actual size, which is good because you're plotting this before the game. You place the template at the location you marked down earlier. So again, you don't have any flexibility in this. So usually you can choose those places on the board that you think they're going to actually occupy the enemy. After the template is placed, you carry out an attack as you would an artillery attack, because they generally give you barrage points on your orbital bombardment. And bombardments never benefit from crossfire, so don't even try it, guys. FAQ time, do all formations that are under an orbital bombardment template receive a blast marker for coming under fire? And the answer is yes, so if you've managed to get a few under, that's great for you. Are there any restrictions for placing extra orbital bombardment templates? No. So you can, depending on the size of your bombardment, get extra orbital bombardment templates. But what about pinpoint attacks, the other option? Pinpoint attacks can only be made on enemy war engines. So your pinpoint attacks still have restrictions. They're accurate, more accurate than bombardments, but it's not a sniper rifle. You pick a target anywhere on the board, provided it's a war engine, and you attack it. You can spread each pinpoint attack among war engines, or you can concentrate them all on one target, so that's good for your flexibility. And you do not have to record any coordinates for pinpoint attacks, so there's a greater flexibility in being able to go, all right, that's the threat now, I'll attack that. Let's have a look at some questions that come out of this. If a spacecraft has multiple pinpoint attacks and uses them to attack separate formations, do they each get a blast marker for coming under fire? And the answer is yes. So you've got some I suppose, added bonuses here that you can spread out a few extra blast markers with your orbital bombardments and your pinpoint attacks. If a formation contains multiple war engines, who picks the target of a pinpoint attack? The attacker. Tell your commissars to stop opening hatches and waving swords around. They can be seen from space. It's a bit of a joke there, but the attacker decides which actual war engines take the damage. Planetfall. So planetfall is essentially how you deliver troops to the board. So the process of delivering the troops to the battlefield by using your spacecraft. So it might be in transport ships, or it might actually be in drop pods, something like that. Units able to use planetfall will have it noted on their data sheet. Spacecraft have the number of units on their data sheet that it can transport. So you don't have an unlimited amount that you can fit on your spaceship. Even though these things are huge, they still will tell you you get this many Orklanders or this many Thunderhawks, whatever it might be, this many units. And you keep the units making planetfall off the table, so don't set them up at the start of the game. Units on the spacecraft can make planetfall on the turn the spacecraft arrives. So as soon as that spacecraft arrives, you drop those troops down. It happens all simultaneously, remember? And you place on a unit within 15 centimeters of the nominated position. So remember, you marked down where you were going to do the planetfall with that particular formation. Then you scatter the unit 2d6 centimeters in a random direction, forgive the spelling. Any units being transported by the unit can be disembarked. So if you've got land raid of some Terminators in, they can get out. And the landing does not trigger Overwatch, but disembarking troops from transports do. You continue with all units until done, and any out of formation must move back to a legal position when taking an action. If they land off the table, they are destroyed. And just note here, it says continue with all units. You're not scattering the formation. You're placing units down, and you are essentially moving that unit in a 2d6 centimeter random direction. Then place the next unit down, scatter it, next unit down, scatter it. And so there could be a formation where they're out of legal position because they're too far away from each other, and you have to fix that up in your next action. So if they land off the table, they're destroyed. If they land on impassable terrain or inside a zone of control for an enemy, or even on top of a unit that belongs to your opponent, then your opponent can place that unit to the closest legal spot. It has to be closest, has to be legal, but if there is a choice, they can choose where that goes, and that can split you up and move you out of position. So be careful. Units that land by planetfall can take an action later in the turn. So you get dropped in by planetfall and you are free to then do what you have to do. And remember, you can retain initiative as a bit of a tactical move there. So drop them in and then retain and activate straight away. So quite powerful. They essentially land on the board when the spacecraft takes its action. Aircraft that land via planetfall count as a landed aircraft and follow those rules. So example, they may take off later at the end of the turn and get out of there. All right, FAQs. Can flak attacks be made against an aircraft that enters play via planetfall? And the answer is no. So planetfall, one of the big benefits to planetfall over things like an air assault or just landing normally with a transport aircraft is you can't make flak attacks against planetfall. So you're not going to die on your way in and have everyone butchered mercilessly. And what happens when the nearest area of clear ground isn't big enough to deploy an entire formation entering via planetfall? The opposing player moves it to the nearest area of clear ground where the entire formation can deploy. So again, these are corner cases, but there can just be some kind of funky situations where all of a sudden your formation is nowhere near where you planned it to land. But hey, that's battle. That's what happens. And with that, we get to the end of our video on spacecraft for Epic Armageddon. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's been a long series, I know, going through all the rules. We still have more to come across, to go through, like I said. Keep an eye out for more content coming on the channel around Epic Armageddon. I do enjoy it and hopefully got a bit more time for that now. By all means, like, subscribe, do all that usual stuff. And hopefully, maybe this week even, I'll have that Orc Army review out as well. All right, have a great day.